In the chaos of battle, generals begged for speed, for power, for anything that could save their men. What they got instead was the unlikeliest of saviors, a flying tank, slow but unbreakable. The Warthog, mocked by many, feared by enemies, arrived first. And with it, a pilot no one believed in, who would rewrite the fate of the battlefield. The valley was choking with smoke. Black plumes rose into the sky, twisting and curling like dying serpents. The sound of artillery thundered in the distance, echoing off the mountains. Every explosion sent tremors through the ground, rattling helmets and shaking the bones of weary soldiers. On the front line, men crouched in shallow trenches, clutching their rifles as if holding on to their last thread of hope. Faces smeared with dirt. Eyes red from smoke and exhaustion. The smell of burning fuel and charred metal filled the air. Clinging to every breath they took. They were surrounded. Enemy armor had cut off their retreat. Columns of tanks now pressed forward from the north and the west, their silhouettes looming through the haze. Mortars pounded from the east. And from the south, enemy infantry closed in like a tightening noose. There was nowhere left to run. Inside the command post, the atmosphere was suffocating. Maps lay sprawled across the table, covered in red markers that crept closer with every passing hour. The radios crackled constantly, not with good news, but with desperate calls for help. The colonel stood at the center, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding on the battlefield display. His hands were steady, but his voice carried the weight of doom. "Air support," he barked into the radio. "We need air support now." A pause. Only static replied. The silence pressed harder than the shelling outside. One of his staff officers leaned forward, voice strained. "Sir, if we don't get cover in the next 20 minutes, the eastern line will collapse." The colonel slammed his fist onto the table. "Then get me something in the air. Anything. F-16, F-15, I don't care what it is, just get it here." Outside, the soldiers could feel the tension. They looked skyward after every explosion, hoping, praying, to see the sleek silhouette of American fighters slicing through the clouds. Men who had fought bravely for days now clutched their rifles with trembling hands. Some whispered prayers. Others sat in silence, lost in the hopelessness of the moment. In the command post, the radio sparked once more. The colonel seized it, almost shouting. "This is Falcon Command. I need a jet in the air, now. Do you hear me? Now." The reply came, faint but clear. "Copy that. We'll send what we have." The colonel exhaled sharply, relief washing over his face. Finally, something. Finally, a chance. But he didn't know what was coming. Not yet. His staff exchanged uncertain glances. "What do they mean, what we have?" one muttered. "Are they sending drones? Helicopters?" The colonel didn't care. As long as it had wings. As long as it could bring fire from the sky, it would be enough. Or so he thought. Minutes crawled by. The soldiers outside kept glancing upward, listening for the familiar roar of jet engines. The ground trembled again, but this time, it wasn't artillery. It was distant. Steady. Like thunder rolling in the sky. The battlefield held its breath. Smoke swirled above the trenches. The wounded groaned. The living waited. And then, it came. A sound that was not thunder, but something far more terrifying. A metallic roar, ripping through the valley. BRRT. The unmistakable growl of a GAU-8 Avenger cannon. Every head snapped upward. Every soldier froze. Eyes scanned the smoke-filled sky, searching. And then they saw it. Not the sleek outline of an F-16. Not the cutting-edge silhouette of an F-35. Not even the formidable bulk of an F-15. Instead, it was a beast of another kind. The A-10 Warthog. Broad wings. Twin engines mounted high on its back. Ugly. Slow. But unmistakably powerful. The reaction on the ground was instant, and divided. Some soldiers cheered, desperate for any ally in the sky. But others? Their faces twisted with disappointment. Murmurs spread through the trenches like wildfire. That's it. That old thing. It's too slow, it won't last 5 minutes up there. They're sending us a relic to save us. Even the colonel, standing just outside his command post, felt his stomach twist. This was not what he had asked for. This was not the jet he had pictured when he begged for salvation. He wanted speed. He wanted firepower. He wanted the cutting edge of modern aviation. Instead, he got the Warthog. It lumbered into view, wings cutting low through the haze. Its engines howled like some wounded animal, not sharp, not clean, but guttural. Every motion looked heavy, deliberate. Almost clumsy compared to the grace of a fighter jet. The colonel shook his head. This isn't going to work. But then, a whisper broke the silence. Wait, who's flying it? At first, no one paid attention. But the question grew louder, passed from man to man, from trench to trench. Someone near the radio spoke in a hushed tone. It's her. She volunteered. The words rippled outward. Her. Not him. Not one of the seasoned, battle-hardened male pilots they all expected. Her. A woman. Eyes widened. Mouths fell open. Perhaps speed wasn't what they needed. Perhaps stealth wasn't salvation. Perhaps the answer lay in the one they had dismissed all along. The A-10. The Warthog. And the pilot they never believed in. One soldier raised his head, eyes narrowing. Wait, do you hear that? Another joined him, straining to listen through the chaos. A low, guttural rumble. Growing louder with every second. Not sleek. Not sharp. But heavy. Relentless. The colonel stepped outside the command post, squinting into the haze. At first, it wasn't an F-15. It wasn't an F-35. It was something else. Something no one expected. The sound grew louder. Soldiers froze, staring upward in disbelief. The valley shook as explosions rolled through like thunder. The ground forces below, those who had been moments away from annihilation, stood frozen in disbelief. Mouths open. Eyes wide. Hearts pounding. They had doubted. They had whispered. They had sneered at the Warthog, mocked the pilot. But now, silence. Every soldier turned to watch as the ugly, slow-moving jet carved fire into the earth. Pass after pass, its cannon spoke with a voice older, heavier, deadlier than any sleek fighter could match. BRRT. Another tank shredded. BRRT. An armored column obliterated, ripped open like paper. The soldiers who had clung to despair now saw something they couldn't deny. This wasn't speed. This wasn't stealth. This wasn't elegance. This was devastation. The Warthog leveled out, banking hard, its engines roaring as it came around for another strike. From the cockpit, her eyes never wavered. Her breath stayed steady. Every explosion was her answer to the doubts, the whispers, the disbelief. Too slow. BRRT. Too fragile. BRRT. Not good enough. BRRT. With every trigger pull, she carved her name into the battlefield. The enemy advance slowed. Then stalled. Then began to collapse. The ground shook as tanks abandoned their positions, retreating in chaos. Columns of smoke marked the lines where once they had charged forward with confidence. Now they were broken. For the men in the trenches, the transformation was electric. Their despair turned into fire. Their fear into fury. They surged upward, emboldened by the warthog above, by the woman inside it, by the storm she unleashed on their enemies. It was not just an airstrike. It was a reckoning. The cheers grew louder, rolling across the battlefield like a second thunder. Voices cracked with emotion, soldiers calling out with gratitude. With awe, with belief. The colonel, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, whispered words he had never imagined saying just minutes earlier. "She's saving us." And in that moment, he understood. The warthog wasn't the backup plan. It wasn't the relic. It wasn't the mistake. It was the savior. The beast they had doubted. The pilot they had dismissed, together they had struck with a force that no sleek fighter could have matched. As the smoke cleared, the sky echoed once more with the cannon's growl. The battlefield was no longer theirs to lose. It was theirs to reclaim. Because sometimes, the weapon you underestimate, is the one that turns the tide. And sometimes, echoing through the valley. Each sound was a reminder, the warthog was still here. Still circling. Still unbreakable. The colonel, once furious, once dismissive, stood silent. His lips trembled. The first word she had spoken since the chaos began. "You're clear. Push forward. Finish this." The words rippled through the ranks like fire. Exhausted soldiers who had nearly surrendered now surged with a new fury. They moved, they advanced, their voices fierce, their rifles steady. They no longer fought to survive. They fought to win. Because they had seen what one jet could do. What one pilot could do. What belief, even misplaced, could become when proven true. The colonel lowered his head. His hand trembling as it rested against the map on the hood of a dusty truck. He whispered again, louder this time, voice breaking with emotion. "She saved them all." His words were not a report. Not a command. Not even a confession. They were a truth. Simple, undeniable, eternal. The battlefield would remember. The soldiers would remember. The generals would remember. And so would the enemy. For in war, reputations are forged not by design, not by appearances, not by what people expect. They are forged by fire. By survival. By the ones who prove everyone wrong. And today, the tide of battle had been turned by the very pilot they never expected. The woman in the warthog. The savior they almost didn't believe in. The sky still rumbled with the echo of her cannon. The earth still shook with the memory of her strikes. And the battlefield, once lost, now belonged to her story. The story of the unexpected. The story of defiance. The story of how one pilot, in one slow, ugly jet, turned the tide of war. The battlefield grew quiet. The smoke still lingered. Fires still burned. But the thunder had faded. The warthog made one final pass, its engines rumbling low, steady, defiant. Then, with a slow, graceful bank, it turned away. The gray shape disappeared into the horizon, leaving only silence in its wake. Down below, every soldier stood still. No words. No commands. No movement. Just silence, heavy and sacred. As their eyes followed the departing jet. And then, one by one, they raised their hands. Salutes stretched across the valley. Not to the sky alone, but to the pilot within it. Not just to a machine of war, but to the soul who had given them life when death was certain. The colonel's throat tightened. For years, he had believed in speed. In sleekness. In the illusion that only the newest and the fastest could win wars. But now, he saluted too. His hand shook, not from fear, but from humility. For he had seen with his own eyes what none of them had believed possible. The relic had saved them. The relic had triumphed. And the pilot no one trusted had become the very embodiment of survival. Around him, generals bowed their heads. Veterans stared at the sky with tears in their eyes. Young soldiers, who had nearly been lost forever, now felt something burning inside their chests. A belief. A legend in the making. Because legends are not born from perfection. They are not forged in gleaming hangars or spotless airbases. They are born in the mud. In the smoke. In the chaos of war, where everything seems lost, until one act rewrites the story. That was what they had witnessed. Not just a battle. Not just survival. But the birth of something eternal. The Warthog was no longer just an aircraft. It was a savior. A symbol. A reminder that sometimes, the most underestimated weapon is the one that changes history. And history would remember this day. They would tell the story of how a slow, ugly jet, mocked by many, feared by none, became the scourge of tanks and the shield of soldiers. They would whisper about the sound that meant salvation, the roar of the GAU-8 cannon tearing through steel. They would speak of how enemies scattered, how hope was reborn, how the tide of war bent to the will of one pilot. And above all, they would tell the story of her. The woman no one believed in. The pilot who had been doubted, dismissed, even mocked. The one who, when the moment came, carried the weight of an army on her shoulders. And did not break. Her name would not be forgotten. Nor would her call sign. Nor would the day when she and her machine became more than metal and fire. They became legend. As the last echoes of the Warthog's engines faded into the distance. It had turned disbelief into faith. Weakness into strength. Hopelessness into survival. The legend had been written in fire and steel. And it would never be erased. The camera lingers. The battlefield still scarred, the soldiers still watching the horizon. The Warthog is gone from sight, but not from memory. The silence deepens, then fades into a voice, not from the battlefield, but from us, the witnesses to this tale. Backhand index pointing right. Do you believe that a flying tank, and a pilot no one trusted, could truly turn the tide of war? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories. We want to share this story, not because it is loud, not because it is popular, but because it matters. Every story we bring to life on The Quiet Hero is a small piece of history that could easily be lost to silence. Stories of men and women who stood where no one else would stand. People who did not chase fame or recognition, but who acted out of duty, compassion, and courage. And yet, the world often forgets them. Time covers their names, their actions, their sacrifices. But we believe silence should not be the final chapter. That is why we want to share this story, with you, and with everyone who still believes that honor, courage, and humanity deserve to be remembered. Think about the story you just watched. Think about the feeling it left inside you, the quiet weight of sacrifice, the subtle spark of inspiration. That feeling is not meant to stay hidden. It is meant to be passed on. Because someone out there needs it. Someone out there is waiting for a reminder that true heroes are not always the ones we see on stage or in the headlines. Sometimes, they are invisible. Sometimes, they are forgotten. But they are real. And that is why we want to share this story. When you like this video, you are not just pressing a button, you are helping this story break through the noise of a world that often celebrates the shallow and ignores the profound. When you comment, you are not just adding words to a thread, you are building a wall of remembrance, brick by brick, with your voice. And when you share, you become part of the story itself. You become the bridge that carries it from this small channel into someone else's life, someone who might desperately need to hear it. You may wonder, does one person's action really matter? Yes. It always has. History itself was shaped by small, quiet choices. A soldier holding his ground for one more minute. A medic carrying one more wounded soul through the smoke. A mechanic tightening one last bolt before dawn. Each act, on its own, seemed small. But together, they changed everything. Your action is no different. One click, one share. One word of gratitude, it may seem small. But together, with thousands of others, it ensures these stories will not fade. Together, it builds a movement. Because this channel is not about us. When someone far away stumbles upon this channel, maybe they are weary, maybe they feel the world has lost its sense of honor, they will find this story. They will find your comment. They will see that you shared. And because of you, they will know, heroes still exist. Humanity is still alive. Courage has not been erased. That is the power of your choice. So here is what we ask. From the heart. Backhand index pointing right like this video, to let the story rise above the noise. Backhand index pointing right comment, to add your voice to theirs. Backhand index pointing right share this story, to ensure it reaches the ones who need it most. Backhand index pointing right subscribe, to walk with us as we continue to honor the forgotten. We want to share this story. But we cannot do it alone. We need you. We need your voice, your presence, your action. Together. We can build something greater than a channel. We can build a living monument, one made not of stone, but of stories. Because in the end, the world will not remember the numbers on a screen. But it will remember the lives we chose to honor, the stories we chose to keep alive. So let us not stay silent. Let us not allow their names to vanish. Let us share this story, again and again, until silence itself is broken. And with that, welcome to the Quiet Hero. This is where silence speaks. This is where courage endures.